Hello everyone, welcome to our second webinar for 2020. This is Tony Moles, the Learning and Development Coordinator for the AOA team. Now we'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Kevin Latkowski. Currently the Director of Marketing for the American Concrete Institute, Kevin has 2 decades of experience leading digital marketing campaigns for organizations in the construction industry and beyond, both in the US and globally. Latkowski holds a BS in Technical Communications and MBA and serves on the American Society of Association Executives Marketing Professionals Advisory Council. So welcome, Kevin.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Tony. During today's webinar, we will be talking about strategies that will drive recipients to open your emails. We'll also be talking about strategies to increase engagement and generate click-throughs. And finally, we'll conclude the presentation with talking about opportunities to add email automation to your marketing mix. Before we get started, though, I do want to spend a moment talking about what this presentation will and will not cover. We obviously know that email communications is many times most effective when it's integrated with social media, website, other digital channels as well. We're not going to be talking about that digital strategy today. We also are not going to be talking about how email communications fit into a larger marketing and communications plan. Basically, we're working on the assumption that you and your organization have made the decision that email marketing is a necessary and required strategy, and we're going to talk about ways to optimize and make your email communications the best they possibly can be. We're going to do that by talking specifically about 2 specific parts, how emails can be better by increasing open rates, as well as creating more engaging content and exploring the topic of automation. The first tip that we'll be talking about today is really the opportunity to choose your sender appropriately. As you know, there's several fields that people interact with once they receive your email. So making sure that that sender field is as effective as it can potentially be. It may make sense to have the sender be your company or your organization. It may make sense for your department or your department head or product line. Emails of significant importance may make sense coming from the CEO or the executive or another product manager. Emails that are intended to go to the media may make sense coming from a media relations contact. And really the best way to figure out what works for your organization is to try different senders, test what works, what doesn't work, and do more of the senders that are working. One of the things that people say over and over again, and that is data supporting, is that emails coming from a person generally perform better than and have higher open rates than emails that come from an organization or some non-person. I'd like to show here a couple examples, and I would like to mention too that a lot of the content that we'll be sharing together today does deal with concrete and the construction industry, but the philosophies and the theories behind this content really do apply to all industries. I just being in the concrete industry have a lot of construction related examples. You can see that the emails that are on your screen right now, the first 3 have a sender of the American Concrete Institute. The content in these emails are generic and perhaps more diverse. Several of them are newsletters or with a very specific call to action related to our organization or the position of our organization overall. The 4th email comes from our executive vice president. We do not send a lot of emails from him, even though he does have a very recognized name in the industry. People know who he is. So when they see an email from him, quite often it triggers a desire to want to know what he's talking about. And the last 2 examples you can see come from our membership director. You can see both her name and her title here. The content of those 2 emails is on the topic of membership. So seeing that information, being familiar with the sender helps the recipient of those emails better understand what the potential content would be. The second tip that we'd like to talk about is really spending the time to focus on your subject line, treating your subject line like a VIP, making sure that your subject line is engaging to help ensure that your email will get opened. Keeping it short, being intriguing, being descriptive, using personality. One of the things that I've seen data out there that says simply putting an emoji in your subject line can increase the open rates. We haven't done that here at the American Concrete Institute, although I realize it's probably something that we should test because it doesn't feel like it's right for the personality of our organization, but we've never tried it, so I probably should. But really looking to explore ways to have your subject line being as engaging as possible. One of the things that's quite common is when launching new products or sharing or trying to generate sales, using the title or the name of that product. One of the challenges that we have is the titles and the names could be complicated, or could be intense or descriptive or long, and sort of the default position of using that as a subject line doesn't always make sense. You can see the example on your screen right now, a new report that the Institute published a short while ago. A report on modeling techniques used in finite element simulations of concrete structures strengthened using fiber reinforced polymer materials. Great information. The committee that published this information has spent a lot of time making sure that the information here is state of the art, cutting edge, beneficial. However, it's simply not possible to put that product name in the subject line. What I would do when looking to market this product is look at a couple different options. Take some keywords from that title. FRP, a new report from ACI, this is now available. Try a couple different options. I put two options on the screen here. New ACI report on FRP is available. Download the new ACI report on modeling of concrete structures. I'd probably do an A/B test in this situation. Send subject line 1 to half of the recipients. Send subject line 2 to the other half of the recipients, seeing which one performs better, and then using that data moving forward to send more effective subject lines for other topics as well. And the third tip, really focusing on the pre-header and always using a pre-header. After the sender and subject line, the pre-header really is your third opportunity to share information to encourage and open. It's that third piece of content that your recipient will engage with that will help him or her make a decision on whether that email should or should not be opened. You can see on your screen right now, I put an example of one newsletter that we send out. We use this format for many of our communications. You can see it looks like a pretty standard newsletter with our organizational branding at the top, some images. I think there's 6 images total on this newsletter, headlines, content, call to action buttons. You also see at the very top here in dark gray text on a gray background, our pre-header. This pre-header is designed intentionally to be very subtle when the email is opened. However, when you look at the pre-header in your preview before you actually open the email, on your screen right now on the left, you can see a couple examples of what some emails, both the sender, the subject line, and the pre-header look like on your left on a desktop computer. The newsletter example that we were just looking at is the third example on the left. Here you can see it's being sent from the American Concrete Institute. The subject line is new ACI 318 code seminars with a pre-header of 562 repair code seminar, certification news, and more. You can see that the content of that pre-header complements the subject line and is not repetitive with either the subject line or the sender field. Again, a great example with Banana Republic. You can see it's coming from Banana Republic. You have the opportunity to save on, in this case, pants and denim. And the pre-header has additional content on shopping sales at 40% off. The West Elm example, number 1 on the screen right here on the left, however, is perhaps an opportunity for improvement. You can see it's coming from West Elm. You have the subject line of saving 30% on bedroom furniture. However, the pre-header, nothing is populated in that pre-header section, so this email client is simply pulling in the first content that appears in the email, which is a link which does little to nothing to help you, the recipient, decide whether you should or shouldn't open this email. Important when you look at the 3 examples on your desktop, perhaps even more important when you look at the examples of how this pre-header content appears on a mobile device. The first example here is being sent from ENR webinars, the subject line of how to build a drone program, pre-header text, very succinct and descriptive, gaining tips on how to effectively build and expand drone operations through your organization. You as a recipient of this email would know that if you open this email, you'll learn about how to sign up for this webinar and more information about what that webinar is about. The Canvas Pop example here, on the other hand, perhaps an opportunity to make that pre-header content more beneficial. Nothing is populated in that pre-header section, so simply this email is pulling in the first available content, which is a link that does little to entice you to want to open the email. Third opportunity, this Personify email. The sender is from Personify, and you see the pre-header has Personify Connect and Personify Community, repetitive with the sender, and perhaps this is an opportunity that instead of repeating content that you as a recipient already see, you could introduce new content. Perhaps a pre-header that was more unique to the content of the email would be more effective in enticing you to open this email. The fourth tip I'd like to encourage is really remember that timing is everything. As you're planning your email campaign, think about when your audience is at work, when your audience perhaps may be sitting at their desk. Think about as a receiver of emails yourself. I know what I oftentimes do, and I know hear from many others as well, coming into work in the morning and perhaps having dozens or hundreds of emails in your inbox that have arrived overnight. In a split second, you make that decision in whether you should or shouldn't receive, should or shouldn't read any of those perhaps 50 or 60 emails. In that split second, you make a decision on perhaps deleting many of them or saving some of them for later. As a marketer, we don't want our emails to be dismissed with the fraction of a second. My recommendation for you is don't send your emails overnight when they may be consumed with dozens or hundreds of other emails. Think also about the time of the day that your recipient's at their desk. I know that it's actually kind of comical that I'm sitting at my desk many times at 10 a.m. in the morning, and the 10 a.m. time really stands out to me in particular. You could tell that many organizations generate and test and prepare their email content in advance and schedule it to be sent out at a time that they think people will be at their desk. Many times that time is selected to be 10 a.m. It's regularly pretty common that at 10 a.m. in the morning, I would receive 4, 5, 6, 10 emails all at the same time from organizations that are very clear that they are scheduling their emails to be distributed to me at 10 a.m. Instead of doing that, you don't want your email to be received with others at the same time. You want your email to stand on its own and be considered for the content on its own. If you're hoping to have an email delivered around 10 a.m., perhaps send it at 9:58 or 9:54 or even 10:12. Send it at a time that reduces the likelihood that other emails are arriving at the same time so that your email can be considered on its own. Think about the time zone that your email recipients will be reading that email in, and optimize the distribution based on that time zone. If you're sending across multiple time zones, take that into consideration. There is technology out there that allows you to optimize the distribution of your email so that if recipient A typically reads their email at 10:15 a.m. and recipient B typically receives and reads their email at 2:15 p.m., future emails can be sent to those individuals based on their historical preference for engaging with your content. So it could send future emails to recipient A at 10:15 and future emails to recipient B at or around 2:15, so that emails are being sent when the recipient is most likely to open them. One of the things that's, it feels counterintuitive, but depending on the call to action and what you're expecting people to do with your emails, don't dismiss the opportunity to send your email on the weekend. We found, and we'll talk about examples later, it makes sense. And some of the emails that we send on the weekend actually perform the best. And also the importance of understanding the work week. If you're dealing with a global audience, one of the things that as we started, as our organization started doing additional work in the Middle East, the work week in the Middle East is Sunday through Thursday. So sending an email on Sunday makes a lot of sense, whereas here in the United States, may or may not make as much sense. So really understanding the work week so you can target your campaigns accordingly. And really important is knowing when enough is enough. And if it makes sense to decrease the frequency of the emails you're sending, take a serious look at that. Consider the needs of your specific demographics and target your content and frequency accordingly. If you're sending emails pretty regularly and students aren't engaging with them, for instance, maybe it's time to scale back on the emails being sent to students, or certain occupations, concrete contractors, engineers, certain types of concrete or construction professionals. Knowing how they're engaging with your content historically can give you insight as to how frequently you should send content to them in the future. We've noticed several success stories by reducing the content to certain demographics and to certain audiences based on past history has actually substantially increased the rate at which they open, read, and engage with the content that we send them. So really knowing when enough is something to keep in mind as you're considering those campaigns and trying to get your emails opened at a higher frequency. That being the case, I'd now like to transition to the second part of the presentation and looking at tips to create more engaging content and exploring the topic of automation. We just talked about frequency and demographics, and the next tip really is looking at your distribution list and figuring out if it's sufficiently targeted. If you have a new product, perhaps on concrete pavements, this document may be of interest to contractors and students and engineers. Everyone's interested in concrete pavements, but the contractor may engage with it differently than the student and differently than the engineer. And making sure that call to action is different, if it makes sense, and sending and distributing your content differently based on the specific needs of that specific audience. One of the things that's a slightly different angle to look at from a distribution perspective, and as you're looking to target your content, is geography. We hosted an event a couple weeks ago in Bogota, Colombia. Obviously, we promoted this event to people in and around Bogota because they're the ones who would most likely be interested in attending it. We're not going to target this event to attendees or prospective attendees in, say, Western Europe, because based on the content of this event, they're not going to travel around the world to attend it. So really looking at the geography to help understand your distribution and opportunities to further refine and target your distribution list. The format of your email is another tip really to consider, is trying to determine in advance what your call to action will be and have that inform the type of format that you'll be using for your content. If the purpose of your email is to position your brand a certain way or have you assume a leadership position in the industry, be informative, be educational, it may make sense to assume a more a broader format that allows several topics in more of a newsletter type format. Whereas if the purpose of your email is to sell a product, register for an event, generate leads, things like that, if you have one specific call to action, a single topic formatted email may make more sense. And I want to talk a bit about the opportunity to keep it simple, because the simplicity in many cases is the best way to drive action. I have an example here. This is the same newsletter that we looked at a short while ago, where you can see there's 4 images. There's a couple more stories down below they don't have on the screen here. 4 headlines, 4 sentences, 4 call to action buttons. The intent here is that you open this email, you can quickly scan it, see the content that's of interest to you, and then click through to learn more on that specific content, as well as gaining a really high level understanding of, in this case, 4 specific stories. Whereas if your purpose is to sell subscriptions to a new product, for instance, like we have on screen right now, the new concrete repair subscription, if you're trying to sell specific subscriptions here, details on the product with a call to action to subscribe. With that one simple call to action, users know what your expectations and your hopes are for them. If they're interested, they know what to do. And of course, there are opportunities for a hybrid approach as well. Here we're hosting an event. Our goal is to get people to register for and attend this event. You could see then the register button bright in orange in the center of the screen, with additional content down below with more information, supporting information about that convention, about the hotel. Further down below, there's information about sponsors and exhibitors, supplemental information that supports that main call to action, that hybrid approach at the top. And I mentioned earlier the topic of simplicity. One of our biggest success stories has been an event invitation coming from one of our directors, where we stripped all of the formatting, all of the graphics, all of the colors, and really had it appear a simple, personalized message coming from the director, personalized to the recipient's first name, a simple message of, hey, I saw you haven't registered for our event in a couple of weeks. I'm really hoping you'll be there. Here's where you can find some more information. Love to see you there. Sincerely, director's name. It appeared to be a simple text message that was sent personally, but it did go to a couple hundred people. When people received it, not only did they register for the event because they thought they were getting a personalized invitation, many responded directly back to the director with questions or content, which was a great conversation to have, and it was by far one of our most successful emails because it did exactly as we were hoping it would, generate people to register for this event. I want to talk for a moment about the content in your emails and keeping that content brief, keeping the summary brief, and then linking to your website for more details. If your goal is to drive recipients to your website or a landing page, keeping the content brief is critically important. Here's an example. We're looking for research proposals. A couple sentences about what we're looking for in the deadline with the green button for more information. Here's another example, looking to get people to join us on LinkedIn through this new advocacy-related group that we're forming. Brief information about what the group does with the green button to join us. It's very clear, simple text, call to action that's very clear. People respond well to these types of messages because expectations are clear. Again, on the topic of keeping content brief, having intriguing text that people are engaging with and want to read, and then cutting it off early. The first example here, lightweight concrete is substantially lower density than that made using aggregates of normal density. It consists entirely of lightweight aggregate or a combination of ... read more. If you want to know, as the reader of this email, what that lightweight aggregate is a combination of, you need to click that read more button. By enticing the reader with that content, making them want to know the additional information, they will most likely click that read more button. Anytime we use this strategy, anytime that we cut a sentence off midstream and add that read more link, it is always the most clicked link in the emails that we generate. Similarly, example number 2 about shear. When you want to know shear occurring perpendicular to the surface of what, you need to click that read more button. 10th tip that we like to talk about is sending content that people actually want to read. Perhaps even exploring the solution of artificial intelligence. By understanding the needs and interests of your recipients, you want to send content that people want to read. If they've purchased a publication on concrete admixtures in the past, perhaps they'd be interested in a new program or a new education course on concrete admixtures. If you know that contractors or engineers or professors, based on that specific occupation, have historically been interested in the topic, sending additional content based on the interests of that occupation may make a lot of sense. Looking at the geography, if you're sending content to countries in a warm climate, content related to their interests may make sense. And we talked about earlier, casual weekend readings. Does it make sense to send business to business emails on the weekend? For a while, we thought this doesn't make sense. We want to send emails to people when they're at work, when they're at their desk, when they're in their office. However, we found that people read their emails on their phone or on their tablet or on their device many times, diverse times throughout the week. We're not going to send an email that requires you to pull out your wallet and enter your credit card information, or requires you to complete a lengthy registration form on a Saturday morning. But if we send you our latest magazine with a series of interesting articles that perhaps are just worthy of reading, or technical research journals where you're just looking through and casually reading, engaging with the content, we found that those are actually some of our best performing emails, because we know that people are engaging with them and reading them on the weekend. Sending those emails at that time is generating consistently high response rates and click-throughs. We thought this seemed counterintuitive to all of our logic, but we tested it, we tried it, and since it's been performing so well, we continue doing it. Next, I'd like to take a moment just to talk about mobile open rates, knowing what your mobile open rate is and formatting your content accordingly. It's important as you're thinking about the content of your emails to know if people are reading it on their phone or on their tablet or on their desktop computer. On the left side of the screen here, you can see the same email newsletter that we looked at a couple times already, formatted in a 2-column approach, again with photos and titles and sentences and call to action buttons. That same content on the right side has been optimized for a mobile device. So you can see that it transitioned from a 2-column to a single column. The proportions have changed a slight bit to make it easier for scrolling, and it's just proportioned better so that it's more readable on a smaller mobile device. There is technology out there too that can identify the type of device you're using to read emails and present the content in a way that's optimized for that device. That's what we've actually done with this content here, that it's optimized based on the device you're looking at. So if you're reading it on your desktop computer or your tablet or your mobile device, the content best is proportioned to fit and automatically adjusts based on the content and the device you're looking at. One of the things that we noticed as our organization was looking to proactively do develop additional content specific to the Middle Eastern market, for instance, we looked at some of the social norms there, and we saw that the mobile usage rate was substantially higher than in the US or other parts of the world. And as we were looking for specific communications targeted to the Middle East, we made the conscious decision to create those emails using a mobile optimized format. So you can see here the content looks pretty similar to some of the other email examples that we looked at earlier, but it is single column. It is more vertical than horizontal. Images span the full width. The text is not in multi-column formats. So it makes it easier for readers on a mobile device to engage with this content. Buttons are prominent, links are prominent. So knowing that information, knowing that mobile usage rate allowed us to create a communication that was most targeted to the specific needs of that market. One of the things that we found works really, really well anytime that we have a video. By putting this video thumbnail image in your emails, it's always the most clicked link in the entire campaign by far. Anytime we add a video, sort of the culture today is that if you could watch it on YouTube, that perhaps may be a great way to engage with content. If in this case we have an 80-second video that talks about membership, that 80-second video, tells more in 80 seconds than we can tell in hundreds of words. So getting people to click through, having that big, bold, red, prominent YouTube play button is consistently some of the best performing links and the campaigns that we develop. And a bonus tip, I'd like to talk for a minute on automation and how automation can play a part in your email marketing strategy. I would like to precede that by saying setting up automation is no small task. It takes substantial investment in time and resources to get the content to a place that it can be automated. But when that happens, the results can be fantastic. Let's take an example of maybe you have a new book on concrete durability and how to make concrete that is more durable. If someone buys that book or perhaps looks at that book on your website, maybe then they get added into an automated campaign that would allow them to maybe 10 days after purchasing that book, for instance, they receive a separate email that says, we know you're interested in concrete durability. Are you interested in taking this seminar with us? Depending on whether that person does or doesn't open the email, maybe 4 or 6 days later, they receive a reminder email. Hey, we're hosting this seminar on concrete durability. We hope you'll join us. Maybe they still don't open that. Maybe that's a time that you could say then, hey, here's 20 or 30% off. Sign up for this seminar today, and we'd be happy to share our information on concrete durability with you. If someone engages with the content, if they're attending the seminar, maybe that's an opportunity several weeks later to then market a certificate program that's related to concrete durability as well. Once you know someone's interest, it's possible to build an automated campaign that targets additional related products based on their activity, their purchases, or perhaps visits to certain web pages as well. Like I said, setting up a campaign like that is no small task, but it can be a way to add hyper customization to the content that you're looking to send to your customers. That being said, in summary, we talked about many things today, many tips to increasing your open rates, including the opportunity to choose your sender appropriately, treating your subject line with the importance it deserves, always using a pre-header. Remember that timing is everything when you're scheduling your campaigns, and knowing when enough is enough, looking at decreasing the frequency of your email campaigns. Secondly, how to create more engaging content, looking at your distribution list to making sure it's sufficiently targeted, looking at the format of your emails, if it's newsletter versus single topic. Keeping your content brief, keeping your summary brief with links in your campaigns to additional details, cutting off your content early, sending content that people want to read, knowing your mobile rate and formatting your content accordingly, looking at adding the play button and videos to your email campaigns, and exploring the content and the topic of automation. That being said, I'd like to open the floor up for questions.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was a wonderful presentation. Please, if you have any questions that you want to ask, please enter them in the chat box. Okay, Kevin, we have a question here. Of all the ideas you shared, what do you think is the most important?
Thank you for that question, Tony. It's interesting because a lot of the techniques that we talked about and a lot of the tips really do work in conjunction with each other, but I would say overwhelmingly that really the most important thing is spending that time on the subject line. You can have the greatest intent in the world inside the body of your email, but if your subject line isn't written in a way that's engaging and that encourages the recipient to click through to your email, he or she may never actually see it. I once heard the fact that we spend so much time working on the content in our blasts. Oftentimes the subject line it can be an afterthought and really not really receive the attention it deserves. Because it's so important, I even heard the recommendation: spend more time writing your subject line than you spend writing all of your other content. Really underscoring the fact that getting the subject line right is so important. But I'd like to mention that while the subject line is important, some of the other things really play into that as well. And there are definitely opportunities to leverage many of these tactics and strategies together in conjunction with powerful subject lines.
Thank you. We have another question here. How many stories or items is too many in an email?
That's a great question, and one that I think, looking at the data of your campaign, really could help inform that decision. Looking at how far down are people willing to scroll. I think it's natural that that links, the further they are down an email, will receive fewer and fewer clicks as people may exit from your campaign before they get all the way down the content. But I think it's really important to keep that content manageable. You don't have more stories if your content's brief, but if you're looking at substantial content that's maybe a couple sentences long each, I would certainly recommend keeping that to a small handful. The number of links certainly can increase if you're presenting content in a list format versus in a series of sentences or paragraphs. But really looking at that data to make sure that people are engaging with your content. If they're not scrolling all the way down, if they're not clicking at the links in the bottom of your email, it doesn't make sense to put content down there. So really looking at the data and prioritizing your content so that the content that's most important is near the top, and cutting stories off as you see that people are getting further down that list. Thank you, great question.
Is there an ideal length for subject lines?
You know, I've heard a lot of stats that talk, you know, in the 20, 30, 40 character count is effective. We've sent emails that are longer, that have longer subject lines, and they've performed well too. So again, I hate to take the easy answer here, but really looking at the data to see the length of your subject lines and how well they perform. Many email distribution programs provide that information based on historical analysis of the email campaigns that you've already sent. That data may be available to you at a click of a button, and looking at that information could help provide you with the information to make better informed decisions moving forward. But I think that if we can be brief, everyone is busy, everyone is feeling information overload. As brief as we can be with the content is always a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, that was interesting. We have another question here. A lot of our emails to our membership feature paid sponsors, approximately 15. Where is the best place to position those in an email without distracting from the purpose of the email?
Also a good question. One of the things that I see pretty regularly is having those sponsor logos recognized near the bottom of the email. Obviously, that's something that if your email screens and screens long and has, you know, several walls of text that really discourage people from getting all the way to the bottom of that email, that's not something that your sponsors really would appreciate. So I think the important thing is making sure that content, those logos are located in a place that the readers of your email regularly get to. If there's 15, that's a lot. So I don't underestimate the importance of making sure they're all presented in a way that's readable and clear. But I'd really encourage you to look at the data to see how far your typical recipients are engaging with your email, how far down they're clicking, and finding ways to get those logos as high near the top of the email as you can.
Okay, thank you so much for this incredible presentation today, Kevin. Still, if you have any other questions, you can always email them to us, and just remember to complete the survey. You will be sent. It will be sent to you at the end of this presentation. So thank you so much, Kevin.
Great, thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone.